A subscriber of mine commented to me last week, hey, do a story on the Kiss interview with Tom Snyder. And it's honestly one of the most cringe-worthy and awkward rock interviews I've seen, and it perfectly represents a band falling apart and the deep divisions within the original members of Kiss. Now, in 1979, the original members of Kiss were interviewed by TV host Tom Snyder on Halloween for his show titled The Tomorrow Show, which was broadcast nationwide. Now, Schneider would pass away in 2007 at the age of 71, but he was known for having numerous talk shows over the years on NBC in the 70s and 80s and on CBS in the early 90s. And Kiss guitarist Ace Frehley put it best when discussing the band's appearance on The Tomorrow Show in his 2011 autobiography, No Regrets, saying, "It might have been the first time a single appearance so clearly delineated the diverse personalities of Kiss. I enjoyed myself on the show, and I wasn't trying to anger anyone. After the interview, Tom came back to my dressing room and we shook hands and had another good laugh. He seemed to really enjoy the experience Frehley would remember." So when Kiss showed up on The Tomorrow Show, the results were, well, memorable. The interview got off to an awkward start when Schneider introduced the members and referred to Gene Simmons as the bass player. And even from the get-go, Simmons looks annoyed. On top of that, a pretty intoxicated Ace Frehley dominated the interview and laughed over and over during the segment and frequently interrupted his bandmates. Both bassist and rhythm guitar player and co-vocalist Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley looked visibly annoyed. And the only person other than Ace appearing to have a good time was drummer Peter Criss and the host Tom Snyder.
Now, here are the remarkable members of Kiss, and first of all, Mr. Gene Simmons, who is the bass player, who is the bass player, Mr. Peter Criss, who is the drummer, Mr. Paul Stanley, who is the guitarist, and Ace Frehley, who is the lead guitarist.
I'm the trout player.
Now, tell how this started, you know, because Gene came in and he said, "I didn't know I played bass." And I said, "Well, I see Aykroyd on Saturday Night Live with the bass fish," and then you say the trout player.
I have to excuse it. Bass.
Yes,
I've been called many things, but not the bass.
Never a bass player.
There were lots of bands that had half the equipment. Oh, I see there's a live human being over there. Half the equipment is right here in front of us.
Wait a second. Have you recorded your laugh?
No, we want to, though.
You must record.
These guys have been talking about recording my laugh. We've done 15 albums. They've never done it. Maybe on the 16th album they will do it.
I think you recorded it on your solo album. You did.
Absolutely not.
No, he didn't. Yeah.
Ace has been saving it for a Kiss.
That wasn't my real laugh. That was just a compilation of...
All right, upcoming and future Kiss albums, Ace Frehley's laugh. Right.
You were saying something.
I forgot.
Oh, all right, fine.
No, I know what it was. When we first started out, we had so much equipment that the other bands...
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
We had no equipment. We were broke.
Oh, you remember the Marshall lamps and all that?
Oh, the phony Marshall lamps were
That's
incredible.
right, phony Marshall lamps. And we used to tour. And people just used to get very, very angry at the fact that we could come out, put on a... We had a levitating drum set.
Wait,
we were still doing
that
the 30...
was funny. It would go up 6 feet, but there was like guys with ropes.
Keeping it from falling over.
Pulling me up, And if we didn't get the guys for that night, the drums wouldn't go.
I mean, when we first started
You
out,
see the audience going crazy. What goes through your minds? Do you have time to think about audience reaction while you're
I
performing?
feel like I'm in a movie. I always get the feeling that you know, without comparing ourselves to anybody else, it's almost like the mid-60s, like we're in a Beatles kind of movie. And we're not even playing ourselves because, I mean, when you realize that a lot of the people at the show have been waiting 3 or 4 months to come see us, and this is like the big night for them. And when you see all these people screaming and crying and all that...
Crying? Why did I spend all that money? I spent all this money.
This is it. He goes up in the air. We're out of here.
True confession time, right here. Huh? True confession time. Right. Exclusive on the Tom Snyder program.
That was good. You'll suffer in the dressing room.
Queens. I'm from Queens, New York. Actually, not too far away from Paul's house. We kind of used to wave to each other before we knew. That's right. Before we knew each other, I'd see this guy waving back. I'd wave.
Gene was into telescopes.
Telescopes.
He loves it. Ace loves it.
Ace loves anything.
I'll tell you something.
I get beat up
before you guys came on. they gave me a little sheet on each one of you to read, you know, where you're from and how you grew up and blah, blah, blah. And the note said, now, Ace seems to be the most laid back of the four, and he's the one who'll probably be the hardest to make talk.
Well, this is not Ace.
Oh, this isn't Ace.
Oh, this is George. This is George.
I'm an imposter. Ace is back in his ass.
That's true.
We got our roadmap.
Who's on first? What's on second? He used to paint himself green
We were still ready to
every once in a while.
And
That's where the makeup comes in.
I knew Gene and I would be in a band.
Flash Gordon, and you know, I have my cape. Yeah.
But you're kind of like a spaceman, huh?
No, actually, I'm a plumber. On the side. Look.
Well, listen, I got a little piece of pipe backstage I'd like to have you work on.
Tell me about it. Oh, you wanted it, I went dead.
You old sweet talker, you.
Is that we're trying to put across. And Ace ultimately.
Serious,
Ace, yeah, look at him. Hi, Mom. Ace ultimately would look into the Mylar and start laughing at himself.
And I thought he liked me, kept up.
Having a rotten time, right, Tom?
I'm having an awful time.
Take it easy. It'll get better.
We'll hope so.
Okay.
Nice bet.
How are you, Tom?
I'm all right, thank you. In your off time. I mean, when you're not performing, not in your off time, but when you're. What is the recreational activity that you enjoy?
Oh, orgies,
Yeah,
sacrifices.
human sacrifice.
Human sacrifices.
There's a movie where it says the guy said orgies.
Orgies, that's right.
Oggy doggy
No,
doggy.
I do various things.
Do you mind if I hold on to him? He's...
No, you can hold him as long as you like.
Thank
Just
you.
make certain that when you leave, he stays.
Stays there.
Okay.
Then you'll
I've
go
heard
take
the
one
horror
by.
stories about thefts. Yes.
Yeah.
Leaps and bounds.
It's crazy. If we're in a hotel across the street from the halls we're playing, it really looks like Ringling Brothers because you see parents, you see 6 years old, you see 25-year-olds. It's really it appeals to a
And
lot
if we
of.
did a concert in Bombay, there would even be cows.
I bet you didn't know that, did you?
I don't believe
If you cross the street,
Look at this guy. He's a guy.
I'm getting bruised by you.
Wake up.
I'm amazed.
I'm getting killed. I'll do it with you at the same time.
I've got to.
Ironically, Schneider at one point notes that his producers had warned him Frehley would be the hardest to make talk, but Schneider seems to enjoy Frehley's behavior as it cut the typical mold of his standard interviews. And in 2012, guitarist and co-singer Paul Stanley looked back at the segment during an interview where he said, "It wasn't that big of a fun time because you have to respect your position, you have to respect your job, and you have to respect the people that you're trying to communicate with. It may seem funny that someone's drunk, but the fact is, the root of it was, I believe, a contempt and lack of respect for the audience and the fans. So sure, you can look at it and chuckle. Yeah, I can too, but I see the deeper. And I look at it and say, what a shame to take this lofty position that somebody gave us and spit in its face. And by showing up inebriated or unable to connect the sentence, it may be funny on the surface, but what's below the surface is a lack of appreciation for a gift that you've been given." Now, drummer Peter Criss offered a different take in his 2012 autobiography, Makeup to Breakup, saying, "For the first time, Ace and I hijacked an interview from Gene and Paul, and the results were hilarious." Now, Frehley admitted in his autobiography to be drinking before the interview, revealing, "I was nervous as hell about going on network TV, live, in front of millions of people, so I started pounding some Stoli in the back of my limo as soon as it passed through my gates on the way to the city." And Frehley went on to explain in his book that he arrived in the studio and the band's manager Bill Lecointe met him with a bottle of champagne, with Frehley recalling, "By the time we took our places opposite Tom on the set, in full Kiss costume and makeup, I was feeling no pain and I was ready for anything." Apart from being inebriated, Frehley could tell he was agitating Simmons and Stanley, saying, "If you watch the video, you can actually see me turning to Gene and putting my hands up at one point and quietly saying, 'What?' like a child who's misbehaving at a family function and wants his dad to loosen up a bit and join in on the fun. How seriously can you take yourself when you're sitting there in superhero costume and a full face of makeup? I love the guy, but he never clearly got it," recalled Frehley. And it's so obvious from the interview that you can clearly see two camps on television. Seated on one side was Gene and Paul, and across from them was Ace and Peter. And it was around this time that Kiss released their 7th studio album Dynasty, which featured the massive hit I Was Made for Loving You. But as the interview showed, there was 2 divided camps within the band. The year prior to Dynasty, each of the members of Kiss released their own solo records on the same day, and it marked the first time any rock band had its members release solo records on the same day. In fact, the solo efforts were an effort by the group to alleviate some of the growing tensions and allow the members to get out their creative energy. In addition to that, Kiss's recording contract did allow for 4 solo records, with each record counting as half an album, which would count towards the group's 5-record commitment to their label, and they were actually marketed as Kiss records. And in the run-up to the solo albums being released, Frehley and Chris threatened to quit the group and both expressed a desire to pursue solo careers. Each camp of the band blamed the other for the rising tensions in the group, with Stanley and Simmons feeling that Chris and Frehley's substance abuse issues and their extracurricular activities were having a negative impact on their contributions to the band, with one famous story having Ace skipping a recording sessions because he was gambling, while in return Chris and Frehley felt that Stanley and Simmons exerted too much control over the group from a creative standpoint. Now, the band wouldn't be together much longer. The foursome would play their final show on the Dynasty Tour 6 weeks after appearing on the Tom Snyder Show, and it would be the last time Kiss's original lineup played together until 1996. The Dynasty Tour was seen as a commercial failure due to numerous shows being cancelled due to poor ticket sales, and this was likely due to the fact that the public was inundated by 5 Kiss albums in 1978 alone, along with Dynasty being released in 1979, on top of thousands of pieces of Kiss memorabilia. Added into the mix too was that Kiss seemed to be embracing disco with singles like I Was Made for Loving You, which would alienate their original fan base. So that does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like button and subscribe. And as always, let me know which stories you'd like to see me cover in future episodes of my channel. Take care.